Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, I would like to remind you to please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So, this week, as far as news is gone, has not been that bad. And when I say not that bad, I mean nothing catastrophically bad has happened. I mean, the bar is very, very low now, people, for it being a decent news week. But there is still a lot to discuss, especially in the areas that libertarians care about, like censorship, online censorship. The people who want the online censorship and aren't getting it, the people who are getting the online censorship and not wanting it, and also a former president died and there's riots in Paris. But we'll get to all that. So let's go ahead and start really with all of the online censorship things that have happened since the last time I recorded last week, which I can't believe that it's only been a week. This news cycles move so fast now. It's crazy, and there's so much stuff that happens in between recordings that's like, it's almost hard to keep up sometimes. But we'll go ahead and start where we kind of left off last week. And just as a side note to just kind of like kick this off, right after I finished up recording last Thursday, the news came down that Laura Loomer, which like I said last week, had been kicked off of Twitter for Twitter things. I really don't fucking know because I don't follow her. Like, that's not really my jam. But she decided to go to the New York headquarters of Twitter and handcuff herself to the door to try to make some kind of statement. But she only stayed there for like 2 hours, I think, if even that. And Twitter played it perfectly because they were basically like, we don't care. She can be out there if she wants to. We're not going to press charges. We're not going to do anything. If she wants to stay chained to the door, that's her business. And yeah, so basically NYPD is out there and they're saying that, okay, well, there's nothing we can really do. Like, they're not telling us to arrest you or anything. So I guess you can just stay chained to the door until you're ready to not be chained to the door anymore, which, like I said, lasted about 2 hours. And so NYPD had to like cut her away from the door because I don't know what she did with the keys, whatever. But they cut her loose and I guess they took her down to the station, but they weren't actually arresting her. I'm not entirely sure where we left off on that. But anyway, so that happened. And so kind of after that little stunt, which that's all it is. It's a stunt. They didn't give her account back, by the way. She's still not on Twitter. So I don't know what exactly she was trying to accomplish, but whatever it was outside of getting attention, it didn't work. Anyway, so after that, we had a couple of different pieces I saw come through saying that Congress or the government or some entity needs to do something about people getting kicked off of social media because of, for whatever reasons, people get kicked off of social media. I mean, there's a lot, and we're going to talk about a couple of them, but basically what I saw happen was there was a couple different pieces that came out trying to cite Section 230 of the Communications Decency Code as a reason for why the government should get involved and start treating online platforms like Twitter or Facebook or any other platform that allows people to post on it, like third-party people, not people that actually work for the site or anything, that they should start being treated as publishers and not platforms because they're editing content, they're kicking people off. And I want to go ahead and kick off this discussion because I don't think I've ever actually specifically read this out loud to you guys, but let me give you the actual text of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Code. Section 230 states, "No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider." That's it. Full stop. What Section 230 has always been interpreted as, and what it was meant to do, is to basically say that if you have a platform and you allow third-party people to post on it, the platform is not responsible for anything that a third-party user posts on it. And obviously, this applies to everything on the internet, every website that has a comment section, every blog that has a comment section, things like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, anything where there is third-party content being posted, that as a platform, you are not to be held legally responsible for anything that somebody else posts to the platform. And also, for what it's worth, it also applies to internet service providers, any kind of intermediaries that give you internet access. They also cannot be held liable for anything that you personally do on the internet. The only person that can be held liable is you personally. And Section 230 is really the one section of the Communications Decency Act that has survived, first and foremost, because the Decency Act in and of itself has pretty much been gutted. But it's that one thing that's always cited as that is why the internet has been able to become what it is, where it's become this area where people can express themselves freely, and that providers, platform providers, ISPs, everybody who gives access to the internet and gives access to any kind of forum where you can speak can do so freely, knowing that whatever you say is not going to come back on them. Like, it's not, you can't sue a website because somebody posted a comment on a blog post or a news article or anything like that. And obviously it brings to mind the infamous Reason Woodchipper story, which it doesn't really involve Section 230 in the way that you think it is. That was actually kind of a different situation. I'll post in the show notes the actual Reason post that really gives the whole backstory of what happened there. But that was really more of government overreach in the way of saying that, oh, these people threatened a federal official, you have to hand over their information. But that's kind of beyond Section 230, and Section 230 doesn't really apply to that situation per se. But just in the way of trying to explain that, like, platforms cannot be held liable for what people post. Anyway, some people have been trying to misconstrue Section 230 to try to twist the idea of who is a platform and who is a publisher. And what people are trying to make the argument is that if you are a platform and you edit, if you delete posts, if you ban users, if you delete users, if you do anything like that, then you've somehow stepped from the realm of platform to publisher. Now, I specifically cited the text of Section 230 because there is nothing in it that says that as a platform, you cannot edit or delete content that is published to your platform. You are still free to do whatever you see fit on your platform as far as the content that is on it. The same way that if you host a blog and somebody posts a comment that you don't like, you can delete that. If you run a news site and somebody starts posting just either like crazy shit or even like bots or anything like that, you can delete those posts. And that doesn't make you all of a sudden a publisher. You're still a platform and you still have the right to edit what is on your platform. Like, there's nothing in Section 230 that says that you have to let every fucking buddy on the planet post on your platform and that you can't do anything about it. So anyway, there's been some conservatives that, because of, like I said, Laura Loomer and other people that have been kicked off of various social media platforms, that there should be some kind of congressional action taken against these platforms because they have edited people, or they have kicked people off, or they've told people that you can't post this, that, or the other, which I don't think I touched on it entirely the last time I talked about this, but when you're put on a Twitter kind of actual 3-day, 5-day ban, whatever, The first step is that you have to delete the tweet that got you into Twitmo in the first place. And this does not, in my mind, and also I don't think, according to Section 230, and I don't really think anybody can make the legal argument that by Twitter asking of its users to do that, or expecting them to not post certain things, or by penalizing people for posting certain things up to and including being kicked off the site, does not make them a publisher. They are still a platform. And while I have been very vocal in the past, and I still am, that I really wish that Twitter would never have started down this path. I wish Facebook had never started down this path. I wish social media had never started down this path of deciding who gets to be on it and who gets to be off it, because obviously you open up this whole Pandora's box and you have people all of a sudden calling for Congress to do things and for there to be legal remedies. Like, I think Laura Loomer is actually trying to sue Twitter for this. Yeah, no, that's not how this works, guys. Like, it's still, Twitter still belongs to Twitter and Facebook still belongs to Facebook, and they still get to decide who gets to post what on their platform and still be a platform. It doesn't make them a publisher. I mean, this is pretty basic shit. But to get back to the idea of Congress doing something about this, I'm sorry, am I the only person that's read the First Amendment lately? It specifically says that Congress shall make no law about free speech. It says it right there. It's very fucking clear. So I don't understand why this call for Congress to do something is happening, because they can't. Per the First Amendment, there is nothing Congress can do or say to any social media platform to make them keep on or off or what the fuck ever anybody. Like, I don't get this. And it's always, especially lately, the free speech crowd that wants to make this argument. And it's like, really? Really? Okay. Y'all want to scream about free speech, but you're the first ones to want to step up and ask Congress to do something when one of your people gets kicked off of a social media platform. Like, really? Again, read the First Amendment, people. It's all right there. There's nothing Congress can do about it. And that's another reason why I was so irritated at the whole social media congressional questioning hearing thingamajiggers that happened a couple months ago anyway, because it's like, what the fuck is the point? You can't do anything, so why are we wasting our time doing this? But moving back to current events, it seems to me that there are now more and more conservatives, bizarrely enough, which, I mean, God, what a bunch of fucking sellouts. Anyway, that seem to be calling for something close to the fairness doctrine to be put back into play. And if you're not aware of what the fairness doctrine was, back in the day, when, obviously, before the internet, and when there was very much a finite amount of television stations, of news stations, and you had newspapers, like actual print newspapers that you held in your hands, and they were paper and you flipped through them and your hands got all dirty. I know a lot of you young people don't know anything about that, but that was actually a thing back in the day. But there was this idea that if you were like a newspaper or you were a television station, that you had to offer equal time to all of the viewpoints on the spectrum. Now, back when the Fairness Doctrine was in effect, there was really only two viewpoints, Republican and Democrat. So it wasn't that huge of a deal to do it. And it's one of those things, like the Fairness Doctrine is one of those things that when you think about it just kind of casually, offhandedly, you're like, yeah, that sounds nice. But then when you really start sitting down and thinking about what that imposes upon the platforms that have to abide by the Fairness Doctrine, all of a sudden you start realizing, like, wait a minute, no, that's kind of fucked up. Like, why should you have to have content on your television station or in your newspaper that you don't want there? Like, why does everybody get an equal voice? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Really, when you sit down and think about it, it was really, not even kind of, like, really a shitty Just a shitty precedent, and that's why it essentially got shot down legally eventually. So we don't have that anymore. But some people seem to want to bring that back in the idea of fairness and everybody getting a voice, which, I'm sorry, no, not everybody gets a fucking voice. Like I've said, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, I wish everybody could be on Twitter. Like, I want all of the assholes, I want the misogynists, I want the xenophobes, I want the bigots, I want the racists, I want you all right where I can fucking see you, because then I know where you are, and then I know where you stand, and I can be like, that person's an asshole. Now I don't have to waste my time trying to find out anything about this person, because now you've already told me. So there we go. I can keep it moving. But it's not incumbent upon a platform to do that. It's not something that they should have to do. And even if you did want to try to bring back the fairness doctrine in some way, shape, or form, now that the internet exists, how in the world would you even accomplish that? I mean, the whole idea behind the internet, when it first started, all the way back in the day when we had, like, Usenet rooms and chat rooms and listservs and stuff like that, was that this was a place where you could say whatever it is you wanted to say. And there was nobody editing you. There was nobody censoring you. Like, you had free reign to say whatever the fuck it is you wanted to say. And that's what made the internet so great. And that's what really made it take off, was that it was just this completely open platform that nobody could police. So how would you even police it now? I mean, we have so many more options available to us now than we did at the beginning of the internet. And it was acknowledged that it couldn't be policed back then. Like, how would you even begin to start now? All that would happen is, okay, you say that every platform has to offer equal time. Whatever. There's going to be underground platforms that are going to rise up that give voice to this group or that group or whatever group, just the same way there is now. And how would you even begin to squash that? I mean, it'd be like playing whack-a-mole. Like, you're gonna crush one and then 5 other ones are gonna pop up. Like, it's just, the idea is so fucking stupid and just does not even remotely understand the reality of our current situation, which is that you can't police the internet. You can't censor the internet. You can censor certain parts of it. You can have certain platforms censor things. We're about to get to that in a second. But overall, like, you can't. And that's what's beautiful about it. Like, you can have and do whatever it is you want on the internet. And that's why it's great. Like, the old joke way back in the day was that there was a joke that on the internet, nobody knows if you're a dog. And that's what's great. Like, nobody knows. Like, you can be anybody you want to be. You can say anything you want to say. Nobody can fucking stop you. And there's really no way to police the internet. Anyway, moving on to some of the other platforms this week that have decided to try to police the internet. First off, we're going to start with Tumblr. Yes, Tumblr. I know we all make fun of Tumblr because of obvious reasons, but what's been going on with Tumblr is, I think it's been a couple of months back now, the Apple Store actually pulled the Tumblr app off of the App Store. So they've not been available. The Tumblr app's not been available. Tumblr itself has been available if you go on, like, your computer or you go through a browser or something. Anyway, what Tumblr has decided to do this past week is to pull all adult, I say that in air quotes, adult content off of the site. Okay. I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, but I know enough about Twitter to know that Twitter is pretty much the home of weird shit. Like, that's kind of the place where you go to look at weird shit, which is cool. I mean, fine. That's great. It has been said, now, like I said, I'm not on Twitter, so I can't really personally verify this or not, that there has been a lot of child porn posted up on Tumblr. Again, I don't know, and I'm always kind of skeptical when I see stories like this, because whenever censorship like this comes down, it's always, always because of either one of two groups. Either we got to protect the children or we got to protect the women. So I'm sure there were pictures of child porn on Tumblr. I'm not going to say there's not. Do I think it was some kind of wild fucking epidemic? I don't know. But so what Tumblr has decided to do is, instead of actually policing their site and just getting rid of the child porn, they've decided to get rid of pretty much anything sexual at all. And let me go ahead and read for you guys the new Tumblr guidelines about what is and is not permissible on the site. Tumblr is banning all content that includes photos, videos, or GIFs that show real-life human genitals or female-presenting nipples, and any content, including photos, videos, GIFs, or illustrations that depict sex acts. Okay, the female-presenting nipple thing has become just a total joke on Twitter. Like, people have just been going in on that so much. And there is a joke to be made there, but there is also something to be said. Like, okay, so women's nipples are more sexual than men's nipples? Like, oh, really? Like, oh, okay, guys. But I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. What Twitter seems to have become, and not just in the weird shit vein of stuff, but I know a lot of sex workers have started to advertise via Tumblr in a way. It, like, not like advertise, but like, you know, post up pictures, post up videos, post up posts, like, just kind of like letting you know, like, hey, I'm a sex worker, I'm a dom, I'm a stripper, I am over here, I do this, I do that. You can find me at this place, you can book me over here, you can come to this club and see me in person. Not to mention that Tumblr's always kind of been a place where, even since Tumblr was first launched, it's always been a place for artists to post art. Like, that was the whole point of Tumblr. A lot of artists do photograph nude bodies and sexual things, and that's not to say that it's porn. Like, nudity and the human body and sexuality have been a part of art ever since, like, humans started making art. Like, they've found cave dwellings of little, like, cave dwelling people engaging in, like, cave sex. So, I mean, this has been a thing that, like, has always existed. So, again, like, obviously child porn is not a thing that should be on the internet, but tossing out the baby with the bathwater, I know, I'm sorry, bad analogy, but this idea that all of a sudden, because thing A might exist, we have to get rid of everything else. Like, we have to get rid of all of the adults who are freely either posting pictures of themselves or pictures they've taken of other people or drawings or videos or whatever of sex, basically, of either nudity or people engaged in sex acts or single people engaged in sex acts, whatever. That's kind of a huge problem for me, because, like I said, it's part of art. I mean, and I don't think that it's a bad thing for people to try to explore the human body or to explore sexuality through art. And kind of future content alert, I will be talking more about this in my next podcast that will be coming out on Tuesday. I'll be discussing the Atlantic piece on the sex recession, which I will be touching on some of these topics again too. There's going to be a lot of sex talk. I'm very sorry. But it's not something that I think really needs to be scrubbed away completely. Like, you can police certain posts without just taking everything off the site. And the funny thing is that Tumblr is doing this. Did they not realize, like, the content that's posted on their site? Like, that's pretty much like everybody that posts on Tumblr. So now Tumblr is going to be tumbleweeds because nobody's going to post on it anymore. So congratulations, you just killed your fucking platform. Good job, guys. Instead of just policing it, you just said, everybody who does anything sexual, get the fuck out. So everybody got the fuck out. And now Tumblr's just like, What happened? Well, good. You did something stupid. That's what happened. But lest you think that Tumblr was the only online platform to do something stupid as far as banning sex-related content this week, oh no, 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 no. Facebook basically just told everybody to hold their fucking beer because they just released a new, they call it a sexual solicitation policy, which when you listen to that, you think, okay, this has something to do with actual prostitution. No. No, 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 no. It does not. Let me go ahead and read through this because we need to kind of dissect this like line by line. So let's go ahead and get into it. Things that are now banned by Facebook. Things that you cannot talk about on Facebook anymore. Everybody ready? All right, let's go. Attempts to coordinate or recruit for adult sexual activities, such as filmed sexual activities, pornographic activities, and erotic dances or massages. Which basically means if you go on Facebook and you advertise that, I don't know, I guess if you're filming a porno or you want to, if you're like a stripper and you want to advertise that, hey, I'm over at this club at blah, blah, blah day and blah, blah, blah time if you want to come through and see me. If you want to advertise that, hey, I'm doing erotic massages over here, you can't do that anymore. And again, there's nothing in here that specifically states anything about the exchange of money. I want to make that point very clear. There's nothing in these new guidelines that says anything about the exchange of money. It's just pure, straight up, if you talk about sex at all, or if you make any mention of this kind of stuff, even outside of it being a financial transaction, it's a no-no and it will get you kicked off of Facebook. Moving on. Explicit sexual solicitation, which is defined as offering or asking for sex or sexual partners, sex chats, or conversations and nude images. Again, this is not for money. They're not saying anything about that. They're saying that anybody who is on Facebook and you say, whatever, you're on Facebook, you find somebody, you think they're hot, you want to send them a nude, or you want to hit them up and be like, hey, you want to come over? You want to have sex? You can't do that anymore. That's verboten. Like, you can't try to, like, you can't try to hook up with somebody off of Facebook anymore, essentially. Going back to this. Implicit sexual solicitation, which is defined as mention of a sexual act along with at least one of the following suggestive elements. Vague suggestive statements such as looking for a good time tonight, sexualized slang, sexual hints such as mention of sexual roles, positions, or fetish scenarios, content, hand-drawn, digital, or real-world art that may depict explicit sexual activity or suggestively posed persons. So, I mean, that gallops past just straight up like hitting up somebody on Facebook to be like, hey, you want to fuck? It's being like, hey, I'm kind of in the mood. Does anybody want to come over? Or the one that gets me is sexualized slang. What the fuck is sexualized slang? Like, so what you're saying is if I go on Facebook and I make a post about some dude's cock, am I going to get kicked off of Facebook? Because, I mean, I'm likely not talking about a male rooster when I say cock, so I guess that falls under sexualized slang. So I guess you can't even, like, say shit like that on Facebook anymore. And as far as, again, the content thing, I kind of went over this when I talked about the Tumblr thing, but I mean, again, it's if you are an adult and this is what you wish to post on the internet, like, okay, like, why? But moving on, because we are not done yet. Offers or requests for other adult activities, such as commercial pornography or partners who share sexual fetish interests. So, not only can you not post anything sexual, you can't ask somebody else for clips of porn. You can't be like, I guess, part of a community and say like you're into a certain fetish and somebody else is into a certain fetish, you can't make an offer to another person to say like, okay, you're into this thing, I'm into this thing, you want to come be into this thing together offline in my bedroom? No. Again, you can't do that anymore. Going back to the things that you can't do on Facebook anymore, because we're still not done. We still got a ways to go. Like, this is insane. Anyway, content that engages in explicit sexual solicitation by, including but not limited to the following: offering or asking for sex or sexual partners, sex chat or conversations, nude images. So, okay, you literally cannot talk about sex at all on Facebook anymore. What? What? Why? This is just so... Oh my god. Moving on. Content that offers or asks for other adult activities such as commercial pornography, partners who share fetish or sexual interests, sexually explicit language that adds details and goes beyond mere naming or mentioning of a state of sexual arousal, wetness or erection, an act of sexual intercourse, sexual penetration, self-pleasure, or exercising fetish scenarios. So basically, you cannot be an adult on Facebook anymore. You cannot discuss sex pretty much in any way, shape, or form with another human being on Facebook, no matter what your age is or what you got going on in your life. It's pretty much, it will get you kicked off of Facebook at this point. And I'm sure everybody can see at this point, like, how even if you're not trying to sex somebody on Facebook, if you don't know about this, like, if you don't follow things the way we follow things, and you don't know about this new policy, you can very easily get kicked off Facebook for something fairly innocent. Like I said, like, you could mention, like, if you just mentioned, like, cock or pussy or something like that, sexualized slang, that can get kicked off of Facebook now. Or if you just happen to post, like, a comment on somebody else's page about their picture or whatever, saying that, oh, you look so hot, or I'd love to fuck you, or anything along those lines, that can get you kicked off Facebook. Like, what the hell, man? What the fuck is this? And I've got questions. Like, I'm not entirely sure why this is happening now. I mean, the Tumblr thing, you can maybe blame on Apple and the App Store, but the Facebook thing, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm wondering, well, not exactly wondering, I'm sure FOSTA has something to do with this, because obviously under FOSTA now, if you are a platform and you are found to be hosting adult-ish content, or at least content that can be construed as like promoting prostitution or something like that, you can get seized by the feds. I've already done a whole thing on this, and I mentioned when I did that this is going to lead to platforms just completely shutting down anything sexual just to avoid any kind of legal ramifications, because obviously, like, nobody wants to be jammed up by the FBI. Nobody wants to deal with that shit. So I think that has something to do with it, but I don't know if that is everything. Like, it almost feels like there's something else going on here, and I can't quite put my finger on it yet. Like, I'm not entirely sure. Like, everybody is screaming about handmade sales shit and all that stuff, and I'm like, I don't think that's it. Like, I don't know though. Like, there's something deeply weird about this, and I've not quite put my finger on it. Maybe I'll talk about it more later once I have maybe some expanded thoughts on it. But yeah, that's what's going on in the world of online censorship in this past week. Moving on from that, I'm sure everybody at this point has figured out or heard, possibly, maybe, because nobody's talked about it, that one George Herbert Walker Bush, aka Bush Sr., aka HW, aka Poppy, aka 41, has passed. He passed away Saturday morning, probably, if I have my times right. But of course, as when any former president passes away, especially one that hasn't been president for quite some time now, it's been interesting to watch the news coverage of it. Me personally, HW is a little before my time. Like, I'm 37 years old. I really was more sentient for the Clinton years and everything past that. But I do remember a little bit of the HW years. And there has been a lot of discussion about his legacy, obviously. And, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, he did a lot of stuff. I mean, he was obviously president for one term. He was head of the CIA. He was vice president. He was an oil billionaire. Like, there's a lot to talk about with HW. But I think the biggest pieces of his legacy that still affect us to this day is Desert Storm, because that essentially married us to the Middle East. Like, ever since we decided that we needed to go into Iraq to keep the Kuwaitis from taking over Iraq, like, that pretty much sealed the deal. Like, it's been ours ever since. Like, it's the Pottery Barn rule. Like, you break it, you buy it. And we did kind of break Iraq, because in the aftermath of Desert Storm, we kind of said, like, okay, we, the U.S., will back any kind of, like, uprising or insurgency against Saddam Hussein, and then we didn't. And that really kind of fucked them up a bit. And just the whole Desert Storm thing has had far-reaching ramifications, and is kind of a part of why we feel the need to constantly go intervene in the Middle East now, to this day. I mean, so, yeah, there is that. And another thing that I kind of wasn't super aware of, because again, it was before my time, but just watching people resurface, like, the press coverage of HW, and realizing kind of how far back the whole quote-unquote fake news and the press attacking, like, a Republican president goes back. And I know a lot of people have already discussed this, but just in case you haven't heard, the supermarket scanner story, apparently while he was president, he went to this, like, mock supermarket of the future, and they had this scanner there, and he was like, oh, look, that's so great, look at this scanner. And people, actually, not even people, let me roll that back. One person who wasn't even in the room with HW when he was touring this supermarket of the future somehow took it and ran with it to say that, like, HW doesn't know anything about how real people live and how supermarkets work and blah, 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 blah. And it's stuck all these years. And what it was is, like, it's not that he didn't know. It's just, like, I mean, as a president, like, you go someplace, somebody's showing you something, like, you have to pretend to be interested and impressed and be like, oh, look at that. That's so freaking great. So that's what he was doing. It's not like he was not aware that supermarket scanners existed, but, you know, you gotta, like, pretend like it's like, wow, look, a supermarket scanner. Holy shit, this is so great. And it's just one of those, it's one of those examples of how, like, somebody can start a story and it just sticks. I mean, even after all of these years, I mean, we're talking what now, like 30 some odd years since that story broke. But just that idea that you can start something stupid, and it was fake news, like, it was a lie, but it stuck. And we can all think of, like, different incidences of that. Not, I mean, obviously, like, modern and more recent, but the one that comes to my mind is Dan Quayle and potato, because he spelled potato wrong. Potatoe. But everybody slammed him as being like, oh, you're a fucking idiot because you don't know how to spell potato. Like, okay, there's lots of people that don't know how to freaking spell. Most people nowadays don't know how to spell anything. You just, like, rely on spell check to help you. So it's just one of those, like, it was one of those examples of something that we think is a fairly recent phenomenon, but really isn't. It goes back quite a ways, and it's still around today. And I mean, I even remember, even though obviously W slash Bush Jr. slash 43 is getting kind of this strange new respect treatment that, like, I'm not entirely sure where the press is going with this, but they're like all of a sudden kind of in love with him, sorta, kinda. But I can remember they savaged him. Like, oh my god, they thought he was the dumbest thing ever to occupy the Oval Office. It was just like every day, like, oh my god, look at this dumb fucking Texan, which he's not even a fucking Texan. Anyway, but it's just this whole portrayal of him, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, it's W, it's the kindly old man, and look at him, he's got candies for Michelle, and look at this. And I'm genuinely curious about the candies, though. Like, what the hell is this? Because when he was coming down the aisle at his father's funeral, mind you, like, he's burying his father. He's an ex-president. His father's an ex-president. Everybody's looking at you, and he's got, like, and he had it queued up, like, he had the candy, like, in his jacket pocket, like, in his suit pocket, and he already had it, like, when he's coming down the aisle, he takes it out, he puts it in his left hand, he shakes everybody else's hand with his right hand, and then when he gets to Michelle, he shakes it to her with her left hand and kind of, like, palms her this candy, and I'm like, what the fuck is the candy? What is this? It's like, what the hell is going on between these two? But that was just one thing, and kind of the segue from HW's legacy to the actual funeral itself. Holy shit, was there some petty shit going on. Like, you had, like, obviously in the front row, you have Donald, Melania, Barack and Michelle, and I mean, Laura must have been in the front row. I mean, obviously W was part of the service, so he wasn't really sitting in the pews because he was eulogizing and speaking and stuff like that, so he was part of the service, so he wasn't sitting in the pews. But it was just this hilarious thing, and then Bill and Hillary, obviously, and, like, everybody made such a big deal about Hillary refusing to acknowledge the fact that Trump even, like, existed on the planet, let alone was sitting, like, 4 spaces down from her. And it was hilarious. Like, it's petty, it's stupid, but it's fucking funny. And, I mean, whatever. It's funny. It's a nice diversion. So, that happened. And I think by this point, when I'm recording, HW is probably in the ground now. I know they had his big, like, elaborate state funeral yesterday, and then he was going back to be buried somewhere in Texas. I forget where. But yeah, they've got a plot in Texas, so they were taking him back by train, and they put him in the ground, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so I'm assuming by this point, HW is in the ground where he wants to be, in his burial plot, with his wife and his deceased daughter. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up the story of HW. So to move on from that, let's move to the riots that have been happening in France, in Paris in particular. And if you're not entirely aware of what was going on, because it kind of hasn't gotten as much coverage as you would think it would, and everybody's been kind of side-eyeing that. But anyway, over the past week or so, there have been fairly violent-ish riots in Paris. People not, like, hurting people, but people, like, setting things on fire, burning cars, breaking into museums and destroying art. The Arc de Triomphe has had graffiti put on it. Anyway, what's going on there is France tried to institute a 30 cents. I've seen it say 30 cents a gallon, but they don't have gallons over there. They have liters, so I don't really know how that works out. But anyway, it's an additional green tax on top of their already insanely expensive fuel. Like, I saw somebody wrote that fuel there is $7 a gallon, and that this would be on top of that $7. So obviously people were very upset, and the idea behind this green tax is that the EU, and this isn't really like coming down from France per se, it's coming down from the EU, and Macron is trying to implement it in France, that there are certain environmental things that need to be done, like the Paris Climate Accord and stuff like that, and that this green tax is supposed to help pay for doing the government environmental things that seem to be very vague at this point. I don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. But again, this is another tax on top of all the other taxes that EU countries have to pay. And like I said, they're taxed, especially when it comes to fuel. Like, they're already taxed out the ass for fuel. Like, we in America bitch when gas is like $3 a gallon. Like, I'm sure people in the EU are like, you stupid Americans, you don't know nothing about expensive gas. And we kind of don't, honestly. In comparison to Europe, gas is cheap as fuck here. But obviously, this was kind of sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, because what ended up happening is, like, okay, the riots started, and they didn't start as riots, they started as peaceful protests against this green tax. But then, as these things tend to happen, is you have a group of people who are protesting thing A, but then all of a sudden, all these other people want to come in and, like, latch onto that, and it's not really about that they're protesting. And a lot of people came in and turned the protests violent. So, yeah, it's kind of a situation where it started with this particular tax, but kind of spread out to protesting just the general situation in France right now with taxation, with the government, with the EU, just kind of snowballed into everything. Like, just people just generally being pissed off at government and spending and taxing and all that shit, which I totally get. I get it. That's laudable. I mean, the US went to war over taxes, so I can't really be super pissed off about people rioting over taxes. But what seems to have happened is now Macron has said that they will temporarily suspend implementing the 30 cents a gallon fuel tax. I say that because a lot of people are kind of parsing this in the way of saying that the riots stopped the tax from happening. Like, no, you just postponed the tax from happening. And now it might happen in perhaps a sneakier way that people won't notice, so that there's not rioting in the streets. I don't know, just putting it out there. But I did also see reports today that even despite the 30-cent tax being suspended, businesses are still preparing for rioting this weekend, which goes back to what I said of this kind of has snowballed beyond just being about that tax and just being about the government in general. So, I mean, I've got some thoughts on this. And for what it's worth, before I recorded today, I was talking to one of my followers who actually lives in France, and I was asking him about kind of what the feeling is on the ground as far as this tax, obviously, and what it's supposed to be funding. And that's how I found out that this is kind of an EU mandate, not a French mandate, and that a lot of the French people don't support the EU mandate. And setting aside thoughts on the EU, which I've never been quite okay with the idea of the EU. I don't like there being like this organization that tells sovereign nations what the hell they do and do not have to do in their own nations. Like, I don't think that's okay, but that's not what we're here to discuss. What I would like to see happen with the French people and with people in the EU and people in Europe in general is this being something of like a come to Jesus moment. Because if you're protesting taxation, understand that the underlying issue with taxation is when you ask the government to do a thing, they are going to want money from you to do a thing. And to try to kind of bring this back to US policy and also EU policy, like, there comes a point where you can advocate for whatever program you want to advocate for. But when you're not being clear and specific about who is going to be paying what for it, I can't take you seriously. Like, if you don't have an actual funding plan that people can see and then decide whether they support your plan or not, it's like you're lying to people, basically, because you're not giving them the whole story. And I understand the French situation is a little different because it's not people in France saying that, yes, we support this EU proposition, and yes, we think this is good, and blah, 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 blah. But this is a problem that happens every time that you have a group of people who advocate for the government to do something. Like here in the US, when you see people advocate for Medicare for all, and you do polling on it. Like, okay, you can do polling on Medicare for all, and absent of any numbers or anything, it polls great. Like, you can get polls that have anywhere in the 80s to 90% of people supporting it. But once you start adding in the numbers to the poll and start showing who is going to be paying for what, support drops like a fucking stone, as it should, because it's like, once you start understanding who has to pay for things, once it stops being this nebulous, like, oh, the wealthy or the corporations, and you start breaking down that, like, no, everybody is going to have to pay for this, all of a sudden support just diminishes. It's just like it's gone. And so it's when you're not telling people what the actual numbers are when you're pitching a program, you're fucking lying to them. You're not giving them the whole story and all of the information that they need to decide if they actually support a program or not. So you end up with these situations like you have in France right now, where people all of a sudden realize that, like, oh, this thing is going to cost us money. We don't want to pay any more money, and we're pissed off about it, which is a completely valid emotion, but start to understand that it's not just the taxes. Like, the taxes are the symptom. The root cause is expecting government to do things because, of course, they're going to want money from you to do things. Like, it costs money to do things. Like, everybody knows this. So when you're advocating for things, don't advocate for anything that you personally would not want to pay for. That should be the lesson going forth from what we're seeing in France right now and what we're seeing in the US now, with people wanting to advocate for things like Medicare for all and for free college and for any, like, this socialism light bullshit that we have now. It's like, okay, are you willing to pay for it? Because it's going to be you that pays for it. It's not just going to be like some other group of people that are somewhere the fuck else who are going to pay for it. It's going to be you. It's going to be me. It's going to be everybody. So if you're not willing to put up that money, then don't advocate for something that the government should be doing, because they're going to expect you to pay for it. Nothing is free. Everything costs money. And that money's going to come from somewhere, and don't ever fucking think it ain't going to come from you. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you did make it this far, as always, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.